So I was just a test to you?
I needed to know if your heart was real.
In a small village, where everyone knew each other's stories, there was one girl people talked about more than anyone else. Her name was Adama. Some people admired her kindness, while others believed no one could truly be as good as she seemed. None of them imagined that her simple life was about to change forever. The village was a peaceful place where everyone knew each other's names and families. People worked on farms during the day and gathered in the evenings to share stories under the moonlight. Life was simple there, but in that simplicity lived kindness, community, and tradition. Among all the young girls in the village, Adama was the one everyone spoke about. She was the only child of her mother, a hard-working widow who sold vegetables in the village market. From a very young age, Adama had learned that life was not always easy, and because of that, she grew into a girl filled with compassion, humility, and responsibility. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, Adama would wake up, sweep the compound, and help her mother prepare for the day. After that, she would carry a clay pot on her head and walk to the stream to fetch water for the house. The path to the stream was long and dusty, but Adama never complained. While other girls sometimes avoided chores or left them unfinished, Adama did everything with care. If her mother needed help cooking, she was there. If the firewood finished, Adama would go to the bush to gather more. If an elderly woman in the village needed help carrying her basket, Adama would gladly assist. Because of this, many people in the village loved her deeply. The older women often said she was a blessing to her mother. Adama has a good heart, they would say. That girl will go far in life. The men in the village admired her respectfulness, and the children loved her gentle nature. But not everyone liked Adama. The girls her age did not feel the same way about her. Instead of admiring her kindness, they felt irritated by it. To them, Adama was doing too much. They believed no one could truly be that good. Whenever they saw her helping people or working hard, they whispered among themselves. "She's just pretending," one would say. "She wants people to think she is better than us," another would reply. Their jealousy slowly turned into dislike. Whenever Adama passed by them on the road, they would laugh softly and shake their heads. But Adama never paid attention to their comments. She believed that kindness should not depend on how people treated you. One afternoon, while women were returning from the stream and farmers were resting under trees, news spread through the village like wildfire. The prince of the kingdom was returning. For years, the prince had lived far away in the city where he studied and learned about leadership. No one in the village had ever truly seen him, because he had been sent away when he was still very young. Now he was coming back. Even more surprising was the reason for his return. The prince was coming home to choose a wife. Excitement filled the village immediately. Young girls began to dream. Families began to prepare. "Imagine if the prince chooses a girl from this village," people said. Within days, the girls in the village changed their behavior. They started dressing more beautifully. They walked more gracefully. They practiced speaking politely and laughing softly. They wanted to appear perfect in case the prince saw them. But what the village did not know was that the prince had already arrived. His name was David. Prince David had spoken to his father, the king, before returning from the city. For many years, Prince David had lived far away from the kingdom, studying in the city. Life in the city had exposed him to many different people, some honest, some selfish, some kind, and others who only cared about wealth and status. During those years, one thought continued to trouble him. How would he find a wife who truly loved him for who he was? Not for his crown, not for his wealth, not for the power that came with being a prince, but for his heart. One evening after returning to the kingdom, David walked through the long corridors of the palace until he reached the royal chamber where his father, King Arthur, was seated. The king was an experienced ruler who had governed the kingdom for many years with wisdom and strength. His hair had begun to turn grey with age, but his presence still carried authority. David stood before him respectfully. "Father," he began carefully, "there is something important I wish to discuss with you." The king looked up and studied his son's face. "What is it, my son?" David hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Father, I know the kingdom expects me to choose a wife soon. I know it is part of my duty as the future king." The king nodded slowly. "That is true. A ruler does not stand alone. A queen must stand beside him." David took a deep breath. "But I do not want a wife who only pretends to be good because I am a prince."
The king raised an eyebrow slightly, but remained silent, allowing his son to continue. "In the city," David said, "I met many people who changed their behavior the moment they discovered my identity. Some suddenly became respectful. Some suddenly became kind. But I could see that their kindness was not real. It was only because of the title I carry." He paused, his voice thoughtful. "I do not want that kind of life partner." The king leaned back in his chair, listening carefully. "I want someone genuine," David continued. "Someone whose kindness does not depend on status or wealth." The room fell silent for a moment as the king considered his son's words. "So, what do you suggest?" the king finally asked. David stepped forward. "I want to enter the village like an ordinary person," he said. "No guards, no royal clothing, no announcement. No one should know who I am." The king frowned slightly. "You want to hide your identity?" "Yes," David replied firmly. "I want to walk among the people as one of them. I want to observe how they treat others. I want to see their true character without the influence of my title. If people know I am the prince, every girl will suddenly become perfect. Every family will try to impress me. But if they believe I'm just a poor traveler, then their true nature will show." The king looked at him silently for a long moment. The idea was risky. A prince moving through the village without guards could be dangerous. But the king also understood the wisdom behind his son's thinking. A ruler needed a partner with genuine character, not someone who only desired the throne. Finally, after thinking carefully, the king nodded. "If that is how you wish to find your wife, then go," he said slowly. "But remember
who you are. The king added firmly, "You may walk among the people as an ordinary man, but you are still the future king of this kingdom." "I understand, father," David replied respectfully. The next morning, preparations were quietly made, but instead of royal horses, decorated chariots, or armed guards, David chose something very simple. He changed out of his royal garments and wore plain clothing like any ordinary traveler. The expensive fabrics and golden embroidery of the palace were replaced with simple cotton clothes that looked slightly worn. Even his appearance was adjusted so that nothing about him suggested royalty. He left behind his royal rings. He left behind the symbols of power. When he looked into the mirror, he no longer resembled a prince. He looked like a young man from a humble background. Then, Prince David stepped out of the palace and began walking towards the villages of the kingdom. For the first time in his life, he was alone. No guards, no servants, no royal protection. Just a young man walking on the dusty red roads that connected the villages of the kingdom. And so, Prince David entered the village disguised as a poor traveler. Life in the village moved at its own peaceful rhythm. To the villagers, David was nothing more than a stranger passing through. Some people barely noticed him. They were busy with their own work and simply walked past him without paying attention. Some people greeted him politely with a nod or a quiet, "Good afternoon." Others looked at his simple clothing and assumed he had nothing to offer. A few spoke to him with subtle disrespect. "Move aside," one man said impatiently as he passed. Another woman looked at him suspiciously and held her basket tighter. David observed everything carefully. For the first time in his life, he was seeing his kingdom through the eyes of someone without power or status. And what he saw taught him many lessons. Some people showed kindness without knowing who he was. They offered directions when he asked for help. They greeted him warmly. They treated him with dignity. But others did the opposite. Because they believed he was poor, they treated him as if he did not matter. Yet David did not become angry or discouraged. Instead, he remained patient. Each day he walked through different parts of the village. Sometimes he sat quietly under trees and listened to conversations. Sometimes he visited small food stalls to observe how people interacted. Sometimes he simply walked along the dusty paths, watching how people treated one another when they thought no one important was watching. Because that was exactly what he was searching for. Truth. Not the kind of behavior people showed when they wanted to impress royalty, but the kind of behavior they showed naturally. The real version of themselves. And so David watched. He listened. And patiently, he waited for the moment when he would meet someone whose kindness was not influenced by wealth, power, or titles. Someone whose heart remained good, even when no reward was expected. And that one afternoon, something happened. Adama was walking back from the stream with a pot of water balanced carefully on her head. As she walked, her foot slipped on a small stone. She lost her balance. The clay pot fell, water splashed everywhere, and Adama fell onto the ground.
Before she could stand up, someone rushed forward. It was David. He quickly helped her up. "Are you all right?" he asked. Adama brushed the dust from her wrapper and nodded. "Yes, I'm fine. Thank you." David picked up the broken pieces of the clay pot. I'm sorry about your pot, he said. Adama smiled gently. It's all right. These things happen. Most people would have complained or blamed the road, but Adama simply accepted it calmly. That small moment stayed in David's mind. They spoke for a few minutes before going their separate ways. The next day, David returned to the same road hoping to see her again. And he did. Over time, they began talking more often. David would greet her politely and sometimes walk with her for a short distance. Adama never treated him badly, even though she believed he was poor. To her, he was simply another human being deserving of kindness. However, the other girls noticed something. They often saw Adama speaking with the poor boy, and they laughed. Look at her, they whispered. She spends time with a poor man. She will never marry someone important. But Adama ignored them. She saw David only as a friend. At first, David had actually been interested in one of Adama's friends, a beautiful girl known for her confidence and pride. One day he tried to speak with her, but the girl looked at his simple clothes and frowned. Why are you talking to me? She said rudely. I don't speak with poor boys. David was surprised by her harshness. That moment made him understand something important. Beauty without kindness meant nothing. From that day, his attention shifted towards Adama. The more time he spent around her, the more he admired her character. He saw the way Adama helped her mother. He saw how she greeted elders respectfully. He saw how she treated people who had nothing. And slowly, his heart began to change. He began to care about her deeply. But Adama still only saw him as a friend. Weeks passed. Then the day finally arrived. The palace announced a grand celebration. All the young women in the kingdom were invited to attend because the prince would finally reveal himself and choose his bride. Excitement filled the entire village. Girls prepared beautiful outfits. Families gathered early to travel to the palace. But one person did not prepare to go. Adama. She stayed home quietly. She believed the celebration was not meant for someone like her. I am just a village girl, she told her mother. There is no reason for me to go there. Her mother tried to encourage her, but Adama insisted on staying home. Meanwhile, the palace was filled with people. Music played, decorations covered the walls. Young women stood proudly, hoping to be chosen. Then the prince entered, but instead of excitement, confusion spread through the crowd. Because the prince looked familiar. He was the same poor boy many had seen walking through the village. Whispers filled the room. That is the poor traveler. No, that is the prince. Shock spread everywhere. The girl who had insulted him earlier felt her heart sink with embarrassment. Prince David looked around the crowd carefully, but he did not see the person he was searching for. Adama was not there. He turned to his father. The girl I want to marry is not here, he said. The king looked surprised. Then who is she? David smiled slightly. Allow me to bring her. Without waiting, he left the palace. Still dressed as the prince, he walked through the village until he reached Adama's house. Adama was outside helping her mother arrange vegetables. When she looked up and saw him dressed in royal clothing, she froze. For a moment, she could not speak. Then realization struck. You, she said slowly, you are the prince? David nodded gently. Adama felt a rush of emotions. Confusion, shock, anger. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. You let me believe you were poor. You lied to me. David stepped closer. I didn't lie, he said softly. I simply wanted to know people for who they truly were. Adama looked away, hurt. You should have trusted me enough to tell me. Her mother stepped forward calmly. My daughter, she said, sometimes truth reveals itself in its own time. She looked at David, and sometimes a man must test the world before he chooses his future. Adama was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed. Slowly, the anger faded. David held out his hand. Will you come with me to the palace? He asked. Adama looked at him, then at her mother. Her mother smiled. Go, she said. David and Adama returned to the palace together. When they entered the celebration hall, the entire crowd turned to look. Gasps filled the room. The same girl they once mocked was now walking beside the prince. David led Adama to the king's throne. He stood proudly before his father. This is the woman I choose, he said. She has the heart of a queen. The king looked at Adama carefully, then of Complex. The crowd erupted with mixed reactions. The older women clapped happily. They had always believed in Adama, but the girls who had mocked her felt bitterness in their hearts. Still, none of that mattered, because that day, the kind village girl became the chosen bride of the prince.
Soon after, a grand wedding was celebrated throughout the kingdom. Music filled the air for days. People traveled from many villages to witness the union. Adama married Prince David and became the princess of the kingdom. But even after becoming royalty, Adama never forgot who she was. She remained humble, kind, and devoted to helping others. And because of that, the people loved her even more. From a simple village girl carrying water from the stream, she had become a princess admired across the kingdom. And she and Prince David lived happily ever after. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more.